Hey, welcome to our Urban Thinker Campus. It's very interesting one today. It's organized by Cities Alliance and Faculty of Architecture of the Free University of Brussels. So welcome to this Urban Thinker Campus. My name is Didier van Kutsem, and I'm here representing the ULB, the Faculty of Architecture. Our program today and our topic today is a very actual one. And well, you know very well, from Brussels to the world, this is the topic of today's UTC towards gender balanced urban development and resilient cities. And especially also the question, how can we contribute to these questions, from starting from local initiatives to big players like European Union. I just heard that our speaker today from the European Commission is sick, cannot attend. It's really a pity, but I'm sure we are going to have a very nice discussion with all of us. So this program will start with the first introduction. I'm happy to introduce today, just now here, Arne Jansen. He's a urban environmental specialist and leading the urban resilience department at the Cities Alliance. So Arne, the floor is yours. Maybe you can come and give some words of introduction. Thank you. Oh, you can have also
get my own mic. Hi.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Didier.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome everybody also from Cities Alliance side. Really happy to co-organize this event together with ULB today and talk about the mega trends of urbanization and climate change with a specific focus on gender. And I guess we'll hear from a lot of practitioners and also from researchers today on why this topic is so important. Let me just introduce Cities Alliance briefly. So we are a global partnership fighting urban poverty and working on sustainable and inclusive development worldwide. We are hosted by the United Nations Office for Project Services, UNOPS, and we are located here in Brussels with our headquarters, but working worldwide, especially in cities on this topic. And yeah, megatrend, urbanization and climate change. We have a diverse membership that actually includes all the relevant stakeholders when it comes to urbanization and climate change. We have the local constituencies of local governments. We have the civil society from slum dwellers included. We have bilateral governments like France. They will also present today. And yeah, by bringing them together, we are really trying to have an overall an inclusive approach towards city development. I guess the speakers will talk about the challenges until 2050 and what's really at stake if we don't solve the urbanization issue. We will not solve the climate issue, or the other way around. The climate issue needs to be solved within cities. So I guess it's a really interconnected topic. And from our work in the field, we also saw that there is a need for a specific gender approach throughout all our projects, be it really like on the ground or be it global advocacy. We have developed certain toolkits, and this is also maybe something we can hear also from others, how they work on these specific issues. What we really see is you have to include the urban poor, you have to include women, you have to include the youth to really get also to them as an agent of change. This is what we see in our projects. And if you look at cities today, they are not inclusive. I mean, we can include Brussels here, right? I mean, this is not a problem of fast urbanization in the global south. This is a problem we have also here in Europe. So I'm looking forward to a really interesting discussion with you and happy to provide input when needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arne. Thank you for this introduction. Yes, indeed, climate changes can be solved mainly in cities, right? And involving also the poor, the urban poor is quite important. So our next speaker is Margot Bonnet. As we have a hybrid event, she is going to present online this presentation, so people here in the room will enjoy the presentation. And Margot, the floor is yours. Maybe you can share your screen so we can have this presentation and we can have also the, sorry? Okay, very good. Or maybe we can.
Thank you very much. I cannot open my camera, it doesn't work. I think
Okay.
the admin person has to activate it, but I don't care if it doesn't work, I can just speak without the camera.
Okay, so we are listening to you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Margot Bonnet, and I have the great pleasure to represent today the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs as a gender and development policy advisor at the Human Development Department. So thank you very much to Cities Alliance and L'Université Libre de Bruxelles for your invitation and for the organization of this multi-stakeholder event on this very important issue. So first, I really would like to present you the framework of the feminist diplomacy of France to give you the context of the French actions toward gender and climate change. As you may know, the French President Emmanuel Macron has chosen gender equality as the great cause of his 2 mandates. So at the international levels, this has led France to become the 4th country to officially adopt a feminist diplomacy in 2019, after Sweden, Canada, and Luxembourg, and joined since by Mexico and Spain in 2020. We have 3 strategic documents that have guided gender mainstreaming within the French MOFA. So the first and the second documents were focused on our development policy. But the third and current one is much more interesting and ambitious because it concerns gender mainstreaming within all components of French diplomacy, internally and externally. So it also includes all our climatic negotiation and all our action for climate change. This feminist diplomacy is supported by France advocacy in international fora, so UN, European Union for sure, G7, G20. And the highlight of the French feminist diplomacy was so far the Generation Equality Forum. We led it with Mexico under the aegis of UN Women in Paris in June 2021 last year. It was really the largest feminist reunion since 25 years, since the Beijing conference. So bringing together head of states, activists, youth representatives, and leaders of philanthropic foundations. On a regional level, the French presidency of the Council of the European Union was also a new occasion for us to support gender mainstreaming within the European policies. And on a bilateral perspective, France has done really extensive work on gender mainstreaming in our official development assistance. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but we are using the gender equality policy marker from OECD. The DAC is using this very useful marker to evaluate a project between 0 and 2. So we defined the objective to allocate half of our ODA to projects that have gender equality as main or significant objective by 2022. And since last August, this objective has risen to 75% of our ADA. So we are very proud of this achievement. One of the main tools of this gender ODA is a support fund for feminist organization. We are co-piloting the French MOFA with the French Agency for Development. My colleague is going to speak just after me. So we have 120 million euros over 3 years to help feminist organizations to finance their operating costs and capacity building. So this is very quickly the framework of our feminist diplomacy. And it's going to help me to explain the different channels we are using to act towards gender and climate change interaction. Several studies have shown different impacts of gender change on women and men. So climate change effects are more important on women, especially in the global south, as they make a major contribution to resource management, food security, agriculture, forestry, and energy, but also the fight against all the consequences of climate change, such as health. It results from multi-sectorial and systemic gender inequalities. Women's and girls' capacities for adaptation and resilience are strongly constrained by gender norms. We know, for example, that natural disaster reinforce existing gender inequalities. According to the UNDP, women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die in natural disasters. However, they are too often not involved in the resolution of this major challenge, even though they are sources of both solutions and innovation. So they should be part of national and international negotiations, field actions, and also financing decisions. They are really actors in the fight against climate change. So strengthening gender equality and empowering women must be a priority in the fight against climate change. And we know that it's really important to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So what France is doing for that? France has been addressing this issue for several years now. We promote the effective consideration of the needs and role of women and girls by ensuring that the conditions are met for them to mobilize their knowledge, to preserve the environment, and so they can contribute to the implementation of national public policies. At the multilateral level, France has played the leading role in partnership with negotiators, for sure, French civil society, and all our partners from the South in climate agreements, notably in the Paris Agreement at COP21 and COP22 to integrate stronger and more operational gender dimension. France supports now the implementation and financing of the Gender Action Plan adopted at COP23 in November 2017. This plan was created in the framework of the Lima Work Programme on Gender, created in 2014. It was really the first time that the specific effects of climate change on women were recognized. And this plan promotes the integration of a gender perspective in the implementation of the convention and the parties' action. It has been renewed for the next 5 years in Madrid at COP25. And two very interesting points. This action plan aims to help local women's organizations to access climate finance. Let's note that last year, only 3% of philanthropic environmental funding supported the activism of women and girls in the sector. And the second point, it helped increasing the capacity of countries to collect, analyze, and use gender-sensitive data to inform national climate policies, which is very important also for gender-sensitive budgets. Also, France takes part in all the major international mobilization on gender and climate. So France was present and spoke on behalf of the EU during the last Commission on the Status of Women, CSW, which took place in March and was dedicated this year to gender and climate change. And during the Generation Equality Forum in Paris, we succeeded in mobilizing a coalition of actors dedicated to feminist action for climate justice. On a very important issue, the financing issues, France advocates that funding must benefit both women and men and encourage the empowerment of women in this area. So we are contributing to 2 funds, the GREAT initiative, Gender Responsive Environmental Action and Training, that was launched at the G7 summit in May 2019. and the Green Fund. So both promotes climate investments that improve gender equality. Regarding representation and training, there is a Franco-Canadian partnership that's organized 2 training workshops for French-speaking female negotiators from Africa in Senegal and Rwanda. And also France values women activists and leadership through awards. For example, this year on the International Day of Women's Rights, we have a Simone Veil Prize that's every year awards feminist activists. And this year it went to a young climate activist from Fiji, Komal Narayan, who works on the ground, particularly with women and girls affected by the effects of climate change. We also support the Gender and Climate Solution Awards, run by WECF. I don't know if you are familiar with it, and the Women and Gender Constituency. And finally, on the bilateral level, really climate and gender are 2 priorities of the French ODA. I will let my colleague Mar detail the project led by the French Agency for Development. But just to let you know, we organized in the framework of the support fund for feminist organization I just presented, a call for projects with a dedicated envelope of 5 million euros for a civil society organization tackling gender and climate issues. And it was really a great success. So now I look forward to hearing the intervention of all the experts on the following panel to focus on the interaction between really gender and cities after this presentation within the large framework of climate change. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope I was not too long, and I remain available, of course, if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Margot, and thank you for sharing with us your experience at the French Ministry. Please stay with us online, so because we are going to have a discussion later on. Our next speaker is Merita Blatt. She's head of Mission Gender, Agence Française de Développement. And I think you have a presentation, right?
Yes, indeed. I'm trying to connect my video, but it's not working as well. I'm sorry for that. If it's possible to authorize it, I would be very pleased to put my camera on. I don't know if you are you seeing my presentation?
Yes, excellent. We see your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Please, if the problem is solved with the camera, don't hesitate to tell it directly.
Okay, very nice. So we are listening to you.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. Thanks a lot to Cities Alliance and to the Université Libre de Bruxelles for the invitation to this very interesting panel. As just Margot was referring, the Agence Française de Développement, where I'm working as an expert on gender equality, is developing a gender mainstreaming in all sectors, and we are inside the feminist diplomacy of France, a feminist agency working towards the framework that Margot has just explained. So I will be directly going to the 2 questions that were handed over before with the preparation of this presentation. The first one is, how is gender and climate change tackled within AFD, going little by little to the development on urban development, and then focusing on what are the most relevant programs promoted and implemented by AFD on this topic, and what are the main results and challenges of them. So about the first question, how is gender and climate tackled within AFD? I just wanted briefly to focus on the fact that, of course, when we are talking on a linkage between gender and climate change, we are first working and talking about a gender analysis that needs to be a result of analysis of structural gender inequalities in the society, and that of course that these inequalities can be increased by climate change and its effect. I will be focusing a little further on the effects of adaptation and mitigation. And when we are talking about this linkage between gender and climate analysis, we are trying to, of course, remain in a targeted sector. We'll be talking a little bit more about this further on. The elements that needs to be assessed in the baseline study that we do on gender equality is of three main dimensions. The first one is the importance of focusing on the political, legal, and institutional framework, both of course on gender and climate change, and of course on the sector that we are talking about. The importance as well to focus on the project owner capacities on both gender equality, climate change, and the sector as well, and the issues that are related to this linkage between gender equality, climate change, and the project sector. When we are doing this nexus analysis, we're working on all the phases of one project. We're talking about the identification, the instruction, the decision, the supervision, and the evaluation. What's important on this slide is to make sure that, of course, you just don't narrow the analysis on gender and climate change in urban development in the processes of identification, but you follow the same analysis during all the cycle of the project. I wanted as well to raise one interesting study that has been funded by AFD and handled by Sciences Po FCE, which results have been published a few weeks ago in April on how do international organizations address the articulation between gender and climate. So this analysis mapped 54 international organizations, meaning, of course, public development banks, national agencies for development, but as well UN agencies, philanthropy, and international NGOs that are working on this nexus on gender and climate change. And the idea was to analyze their discourse, their narrative, and the study analyzed 8 different principles. I won't describe the 8, but I think it's very interesting to see that depending on which positioning of the institution, you can be maybe more stressing the importance of working on gender emergency climate action through the lens of vulnerabilities, or working maybe on mainstreaming gender in the climate change agenda, or the importance of empowering women and girls for climate adaptation, or maybe putting intersectional focus on gender and climate. So you see that there are different discourse and narratives, and depending on these discourse and narratives, there were 5 key messages that I would like just briefly to introduce, because they are guiding our positioning on this nexus on gender and climate, and of course on all projects, and especially the ones on urban development. So the first key message is that that while women are more vulnerable to climate change, and that's of course has been proved by all the international reports on this nexus during the last years, it's important not to reduce them to the sole status of victims, because their contributions are essential to adaptation and mitigation, and there's an important attention to pay to the questioning of power relations and hierarchies between genders, and that most of the times when we are just focusing on the purpose and the status of vulnerability and victims, we are not questioning these power relations. The second key message is that considering women as economic agents, and this is a powerful message of the work on mitigation, should not ignore at the same time their disproportionate contribution to unpaid care work and their share in informal employment, from subsistence agriculture to services. So This is as well very important when we are considering that a lot of, and the majority of women are working in most of the countries we're working with in informal sectors. And that, of course, when we are working on gender and climate change and urban development, we need to take into account the situation of the world of work we are working with. The third key message is the importance of not to deprive of important levers of transformation when we are focusing on both these two key messages. Fourth key message, the importance of a promotion of a better circulation of knowledge between North and South and the intersection of gender and climate issues. And finally, the important role of countries with a feminist diplomacy and national development agencies on this field. So and finally, the last aspect I wanted to raise in this question is how we do tackle this nexus within AFD, and I wanted to raise some of our key figures inside this nexus. Margot has explained the difference between DAC 0, DAC 1, and DAC 2, and the importance of working towards the important objectives that the strategy on gender equality, the international strategy, French international strategy on gender equality, is asking on ODA. And at the same time, we're trying to analyze the importance of the figures and the linkage between both climate and gender projects. So if you see in 2017, we started with a percentage of climate finance projects with a with a dark gender marker of 27%. And in 2020, we achieved 67%, I'm sorry. So you see we have an important and huge increase of this linkage of projects. And what we do analyze is that, of course, and that's interesting, an interesting figure is that we find a lot of projects that mix both gender analysis and climate change, but most of the time these two themes do not correspond in what we might call a real gender and climate project. And what is as well very important to keep in mind is that we are working on talking about urban development. We are talking about lots of sectors. Either we are talking of public transportation, water sanitation, lodging, neighborhoods, waste management, etc., etc., etc. And each of these sectors do have specific gender analysis and climate change analysis, and of course a linkage between both. About the second question, what are the most relevant programs? I will be putting these slides very quickly. I have already mentioned the importance of climate change vulnerability that is gender differentiated. It was in the IPCC assessment reports in 2014 and in the last one in 2021. Important as well, this focus on disaster risk reduction. And as we have been talking about a lot of adaptation, but the link between gender equality and mitigation is as important as adaptation. And I wanted to take a few minutes on some of the programs we are launching on this nexus between gender, climate change and urban development. I wanted briefly to introduce the first project, Cities 2, which is a project of improving living conditions in Indian cities through a specific support to climate responsive urban projects and initiatives. It has 3 specific objectives, and the 3 of them have gender mainstreamed, implementing both a climate compatible urban development project at the city level. The second specific objective is to strengthen the role of states in the urban climate agenda. And the third specific objective is to scale up climate responsive urban management and practices in the national and subnational urban ecosystem. The second project Gandharpur is developing the drinking water supply to Dhaka population, and it's including a focus on gender equality. And I wanted to give as well two other examples of projects on urban development. The one that we are developing in Costa Rica on budget funding for developing a sustainable and low carbon trajectory and waste management, so sustainable construction, and as well the importance of a just transition. And another one as well in Latin America on the development of a public transportation, urban mobility with a gender perspective, and more specifically the work against gender-based violence. I wanted to end my presentation through some of the recommendations that we use internally in order to develop gender equality and climate change, this linkage in urban development. So the first and most important one is the importance of systematically link gender and climate change. You have already understood that in public policy dialogue by providing a global approach to the SDGs. The second is to promote, of course, this inclusion in the project and with the dialogue with the counterpart, promoting the importance of gender differentiated data, the equal access to economic opportunity, as well as to urban services and equipment. Of course, the essential importance to women physical safety, to access to property, the importance of participation as well, and representation in decision-making positions, and finally, the importance of setting up a monitoring system based on gender differentiated indicators. Thank you very much for your timing. I'm sorry I have tried to be as fast as I could, but of course I remain at your disposal for any question. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mar. Very interesting recommendations also. Very appreciated your 10 points. So please stay with us, and in case we have questions in the discussion later on. So now we have, it's time to have a presentation of local initiatives. And for that, I would like to invite people online and people on site to join the stage. And I think Chloe is around. Yes. And so we have on the stage, we have Chloe Salambier. She's a, sorry? Yes, can you, for all the people attending these presentations, can you activate your camera, please, so we can see your faces? It should work, apparently. So we were maybe Ma, and yeah, that's cool. Now we can see you. That's great. Hello. And Margot, very good. Fantastic. And so we have on the stage, we have Chloe Salambier. She's a co-founder of Angela D Associations from Brussels, Belgium. Welcome, Chloe. Then we have online, we have Lajana Mandaha. She's the executive director of Lumanti Shelter Group from Nepal. Are you there? Fantastic. Great. Welcome. And we have also online Carmen Ledo. She's not there. Oh, yeah, that's right. She has a video, sorry, because of Colombia time change, etc. Okay. And we have Diana Angela Bachira, Program Officer, Pamoja Trust, Nairobi, Kenya. Diana? No, she's trying to connect. Okay. And I think all of you have a presentation or key messages to be presented. Maybe we can start with the video. That would be nice. So we're going to have an address from Carmen Ledo from Bolivia, and she sent us a video so we can have and enjoy this video first. Very good.
Women's engagement in the city of Cochabamba is carried out with multiple vulnerabilities, dissatisfaction, and inequalities. Water is an extremely good example to show the situation. For this reason, I want to present about gender inequalities in the access to clean water in Cochabamba. Water is essential to the human beings and all forms of life. Pollution and lack of access to clean water is proliferating the cycle of poverty, waterborne diseases, and gender inequities. Bolivia is a country with permanent revolution and changes. Within the process of urbanization, Bolivia, Cochabamba stands out as very interesting case study because it's a high population dynamics. Rapid urban population growth has generated an increased demand for basic services, especially clean water. Cochabamba is a city of eternal spring, around 20 degrees Celsius during the cold years, wonderful climate, and the population increase also very fast. 900,000 people live in this beautiful valley. The rate of growth is around 2%. It's located in the middle of the country, and the Cochabamba also is the clear example of to grow in two opposite space. The Bonnet district located in the residential area in northeast and downtown, and the periphery in the south is located in the unplanned districts. The largest population of households affected by the chronic poverty. We have primary information about national population and housing census, and the enterprise that take information about water and sewer, the names and the SAPA, and have very important information about water issues with male and female heads according of the types of connection and payment. In the cases of the household, access to public water supply connection. In the cases of the household do not have water supply connection, inquire about use of alternative sources. CEMAPA is the public enterprise that supports water connection. Only 50% of the urban population are connected with the good quality of water. The average person who lives in the northeast of the city use around 100 and 200 liters of water per day, around 30 cubic meters per month, and do not pay more than 2% of the total family income. In opposite way, in the south, the people need to pay more than 10 times with the only 1 cubic meter. For this reason, the people, the poorest household, need to perform wells in the south, in the city. But the bad situation is this wells is with found salt water. For the poor household, unfortunately, in the financial and political point of view, there are very few alternatives. The average people who live in the south periphery live with less than 20 liters per day and pay more than 10% of the family income for it every month. The average human needs a minimum of 50 liters of water per day to drink, to cook, to wash, for sanitation, and to grow food. The volume consumed by a poor family is equivalent to consume a single person using the public water system connection. But the important thing that this majority women live in the poor district in Cochabamba. And this response that the system does not extend the service where they women live. Water in this situation is an example of inequality and female inequality. Water is a key human right and a public access that the state should be protected. Most of the households have to buy water from the trackers at 10 times more than the official tariffs. The result is expensive and polluted water with increased the infant mortality. This is the petrol can, and this is the trackers. But in Cochabamba also have a lot of source of pollution of water. Water treatment plant, Alba Rancho, is collapsed more than 10 years ago. Sewer water discharge into the river, Rio Rocha River. Sewerage water discharge into Alalay Lagoon. Oil and gas plant, also the another extremely bad contamination of the soil. Solid waste disposal. All of these kind of very bad things increase the infant mortality and also the pathologies in connection with the contamination of water. For this reason, it's extremely important to find some solution. But I think the conclusion about this very bad situation is the face of the poverty is multidimensional, and also female take extremely important action, and it's very important this touch in this situation. The social exclusion, the spatial exclusion, the vulnerability is appear very clear with water is using to try to show and to try to demonstrate. Water deficit is worsening. The poor are still paying too much for bad quality of water. The groups with the larger economic power make use of cheap service subsidized by the poor sector in the south of the city. This is one of the most dramatic proofs of social inequality and injustice in the city of Cochabamba. The challenge for the future, the dream, is to access to water at the household level by poor people. Female is most important to have very good connection with water, because it's also another bad thing is help to produce this vulnerability. The poor people, and more of them females, require good quantity and good quality of water. The integrated approach is essential to achieve significant impacts of poverty. The fight against social exclusion, vulnerability, and poverty requires the participation of all the actors and the decision makers involved in a kind of super institution that identify the key issues affecting the city and the tasks that should be implemented to solve them. Thank you very much indeed.
It's good that we are aware now what is the problem of in Colombia, right? And now we can address the problems in Nepal. Are you there? Nepal? Lajana?
Yes.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, hi.
Can you present, do you have a presentation to share with us?
Yes.
Excellent. Maybe you can share the presentation, or she is doing it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
We are listening to you. Very good.
Right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Very good.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Afternoon here in Nepal now. Okay, I'm very pleased to be here and very happy for the opportunity given. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of our own resources. So I'm going to focus on, like, how we have been working with the women, how we have been working, empowering the women, how we have been working to empower the poor women, the grassroots women in the communities, and helping them to make their voices heard, to influence the policy decisions on housing, on access to water and sanitation facilities, including building resilience to tackle the climate change impact as well, right? So I see that, the women are working very, very hard but then they have remained the silent change agents, because most of the work they do is quietly, silently. Right, so I would briefly give introduction to Lumanti and then also talk about why we are working with women and how we are organizing women and how women are actually contributing in the reconstructions, in the construction of housing, building resilience capacity of the women, and how we are actually moving forward as well. Lumanti was established in 1994, many years back, and I have been one of the founding member of this organization. Since then, we have been actually working with the slum dwellers in the slums, working with the poor communities, low-income communities, mostly in the urban areas, but we do have some work in the rural areas as well. Right, and our mission is to alleviate poverty and hardship through advocacy and improvement in housing and socioeconomic conditions, including access to wash facilities. And climate change, we see it as a cross-cutting agenda for all the work. What we have been doing, what we plan to do is, because it's been growing, it's become such a critical issue, and there is a lot to learn about the climate change impact and issues and principles, and how the communities are understanding this topic as well. So it is not easy for, it is not easy actually to help the communities understand when we say, okay, what is climate change? They can understand about water, sanitation, house, and employment, all these things. But then when we talk about the climate change impact, so it's quite difficult. It's not easy to help them to understand, because all the jargons, the words that we use in the climate change, it's hard for them to understand, right? So we help the women to understand these issues, and also to plan some of the mitigation and adaptation activities as well, to take actions on those parts. So Lumanti is working on housing for low-income communities, building the communities, the community organizations, and helping them to empower, and also helping them to access for better housing facilities. Also, like building the community's capacity to build more resilience against disaster, and also to improve access to water, sanitation facilities, and to empower economic, and to help women to have access to financial resources for their economic empowerment, and also building capacity of the women of the communities, not only women of the communities, and to improve partnership with the local governments. Without partnering with the local governments, it is very hard to get the activities you initiate to get sustained in the communities. So why we are working with women, right? They are very, as also mentioned by the previous speakers, they are marginalized, they are discriminated, they depend, on other sources of finance, they depend on men. They don't have equal opportunities. They don't have easy access to decision-making process. So that's why, so we know that, women lie in the bottom. It's very important to organize women and then to help them to get empowered. So how we are organizing women is, we are organizing women through finance, through saving credit schemes, helping them to support each other. So far now, we have actually helped establish 41 saving and credit cooperatives, all women-led, and they have all the women members, and they have about now 40,000, I think it's about 40,000 women members involved in the network. And they are also advocating for their own rights, for access to finance, and also developing partnership with the local governments as well. And we are also helping them to improve their own capacity as well. They have now saved lots of money in the network. And all these 41 cooperatives are actually scattered in about 1720 municipalities across Nepal in different parts of the country. right? And they meet regularly. They have access to EG finance. And then their role, their contribution, their activities are also recognized by the local governments. They do take part in the development activities initiated by the local government as well. They do leverage resources from the local government and also from other sources as well, because they are saving regularly, they are meeting regularly, and they have demonstrated very well that they can be a very good, a reliable development partner. So they are also invited by the local governments now in the decision-making process. And many of these women also have contested in the local government elections, and many of them have also won the position as a ward member. So we just had a recent local government election just had taken place, right? And many of the grassroots women leaders have also won.
Can you unmute yourself, please? Can you do it?
Hi, hello?
Okay, that's good.
All right, sorry. So Lumanti is connecting with the cooperatives. Lumanti is supporting the grassroots women to get organized as a saving and credit cooperative. And the cooperative has members. They are reaching to individual of all these, the members in the communities. The cooperatives have saving groups. They have a number of saving groups, and then each saving group will have like 25 to 40 members. And that's how, like, this is how they are organizing. There is a big cooperative, it is registered, it is recognized, and they work as a small mini bank in the communities where the women can access EG credit for various reasons, for employment, for health, for housing, to have access to better water and sanitation facilities. This has actually changed this has actually changed the living standard, living condition of the poor women, because everything you have to pay, even if the government actually provide the water, sanitation facilities, the housing, they have to pay something from their own sides, and it is very important that they have access to EG credit facilities. So this has actually helped them to improve their own living conditions, to have better access to the facilities, as well as to link with the local governments as well. This is how the women are actually, this is how the women are linking with each other. There is a network of the grassroots women, Community Women's Forum, and it is a network of the cooperatives. So there are about 41 cooperatives, as I mentioned earlier. All these cooperatives are, they have a network, and it's led by Community Women's Forum. And within that, there's a number of saving groups. That's how the community groups are actually networking and sharing and learning and getting empowered. So the women women participate in all the activities at the community level activities, so that their voices are heard. They have they contribute in the planning process. This is how we work with the women when we plan the housing. When we do the planning, we do the real work with the women. We teach them, we work with them to understand the process and how this planning is done and how they can make themselves heard. This is the settlement planning we have done in one of the city in Chiton area, where women also contributed a lot, like how they would like to see their settlement being planned, where the road should go, where the housing should be, where the other facilities should be located. Women have contributed a lot in designing this plan. They do work to improve for their own housing. This is how women have worked to improve their own housing, to improve the slums, the housing in partnership with the local governments, and also getting support from the local cooperatives as well. So all these houses, I would just like to mention that, when we talk about the climate and climate resilience, people living in the slums, the low-income communities, the poor women living in a very poor condition. So you can imagine how vulnerable they have been, right? And the vulnerability increase as the quality of housing is very poor. So it is very important to improve the resilience, to help them to have a better housing facilities, better access to water and sanitation facilities, better employment opportunities, right? So this is how they are actually building, the houses, the better housing, so that they can actually fight with the climate change impacts.
Jana, can you come to the end, please?
Right. Okay. So this is how the women are also building the water and sanitation facilities. I will be very quick. This is the communities. You can also see a group of women sitting there having a meeting with the local government here. And a lot of work, like, all this improvement, improving the facilities, the communities, women take part. This is all these activities actually contribute in building resilience. You can say I'm just, right. So it is very important that, we invest and support to establish new group institutions such as cooperatives, and also promote interlending to reach out more and more needy, give social needs a priority, implement the projects and take actions for the sustenance, advocate for rights. It is very important. Okay, because I'm running out of time, I won't go long, but I would just like to, end with saying two more lines, see, I have done actually a study in Kathmandu Valley a few years ago. I talked with the grassroots women how this climate change is impacting on their lives. And I mean, it's very hard. It's also for me, it's also new learning for me that, the women said that when there was a delay in rain, they didn't have food food, the little cash income that they have in house, that the men are bringing cash income, that was not adequate for the family to survive the whole of the year, because there was no food from their fund. So only relying on the cash crop, but then only on the cash income, which was not, that has actually laid a kind of psychological impact on women, how to run a house with limited household income, right? That was not visible, but invisible kind of impact on women. And then they also talked about a lot of mental pressure with them, because there is a pressure from the men, that they need to cook a nice food, but then the income is limited because of all this, the climate change impact, the invisible kind of mental pressure that women are, facing. That's very serious. We haven't actually done much research on this topic, and also much talk about it. But then the impact of climate change on women it's like rooted down, and we need to dig it out to see it very clearly, to make it visible. See, another example is because these women have easy access to the credit. So when there was no rain, so I interviewed one of the women here, many of the women actually, they said that because there was no rain, and they had to pump the water, right? They had no money to hire the pump, neither to buy the pump. So they can, at that time, they actually took a credit from the cooperatives. They rented the pump, and then they pumped the water in the field. That was a big help. So how these cooperatives is actually helping to improve their resilience, I'm just giving you two small examples. That's how these cooperatives are contributing in building resilience for the women. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lajana. Thank you for your contribution. Very good, very helpful. And to share this experience with Lumanti and all the developments on site on the local level. We have now another local experience. It is from Kenya. Diana, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Very good. So I'm sure, yes, you want also to share your screen? Yes.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Can you please stick to your time? So we have, after that, we have more time for the discussion. Yes.
Okay.
We can see your screen. That's perfect.
Okay.
Can you see also the presentation?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Fantastic.
I can see the presentation. I'll turn off my camera.
Yes.
To also make sure my name is Diana Washira, and I'll be sharing experiences from Pamoja Trust towards gender balanced urban development and resilient cities. Next slide, please. Okay. So a brief introduction into Pamoja Trust is that we are a civil society organization, and we are dedicated to promoting access to land, shelter, and basic services for the urban poor. And we do this through principled and pragmatic approaches to promotion and protection of the right to the city for all, including women and marginalized groups. So some of these models that I'm talking about are what I have highlighted within my presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is sort of the framework of our approach, because what we do is that we try and look at how do we recognize the innovations that are happening at the community level, at the local level, how these innovations can be modified or transformed into models that they're able to use in their advocacy strategies, and then how these models can be taken up into policy and practice. So for resilient, inclusive urban spaces, then the idea is to incorporate the urban innovations happening at the community level. So generally, this is the framework that we use within our interventions and within our operations. Next slide. So just a quick summary of the gender issues in Kenya. So these include gender differences in accessing priority urban services, unequal employment opportunities, limited access to income generated opportunities, unequal education opportunities. We have an unbalanced share of household chores and childhood work between men and women. Unequal participation in decision-making, rigid and discriminating norms and roles, safety and security, and also culture and attitudes towards gender roles and norms, which is also linked to women's participation in leadership, in decision-making, among others. And then as we look at the next slide, it's also looking at particularly the gender, how gender manifests, how gender and climate change issues manifest in informal settlements in Kenya. So just an appreciation of that, the harsh realities of gender inequalities and climate change manifest strongly in informal settlements where the population is at most risk. So while informal settlements are generally host to vulnerable communities, then women often bear the extra burden. So, and some of these realities that they face that I have termed as harsher realities generally include the environmental, social, and economic impacts of climate change. As we go on to the next slide, then we are also able to get deeper into the context of the informal settlements, looking at the gender manifestation of gender inequalities as well as climate change. So some of the key issues at the informal level context is insecurity of tenure, where households constantly live under the threat of evictions. We have unequal access to land and resources, dispossessions through infrastructural development, lack of ownership in, lack of recognition, of course, in terms of land ownership documents. And within the informal context, it's really not land ownership, but just the rights, the kinds of rights that households enjoy, which could be occupancy to access rights. We have constantly shifting urban ecosystems, increased burdens on balance, work, and care. And then there's also a general lack of awareness on laws and policies related to land and succession, and then limited processes in urban processes on planning, climate responsiveness, and resource allocation, as well as insecurity. As we go on to the next slide, we'll also appreciate, particularly in terms of climate adaptation and gender and informal settlements, is that these gender inequalities are have been a big hindrance to climate adaptation measures, particularly for women. I took the case of security of tenure, or really the lack of it within informal context. Because women and particularly experience the challenges of evictions more as compared to men, and the different violations they experience, rather other than the, for example, the challenge of security of tenure, they also experience other forms of violation. So really, they are more affected by effects of climate change through this way, through the situations that exist within the informal settlements and other violations that manifest. But I've also mentioned that this intersectionality in terms of these different forms of violations or how they exist within informal settlement spaces, then they're able to help, it has been able, they position us to be able to understand or to appreciate the different mitigation strategies that can adopt or that can demonstrate resilience in different contexts. As we go on to the next slide, so the next few slides will just show a bit of some of the interventions that we have done, particularly in appreciating this context of informal settlements. The first one is the no organized claim approach, which is really about organized communities and organizing communities to be able to participate within decision-making spaces. So we have been deliberate enough to position participation of women within this no organized claim framework that is able to amplify the voice of the urban woman, to influence policy and decisions at the county and national government. It's really, other than amplifying this voice, it also links people to the government, particularly looking at a situation where there had been no engagement between people and their governments. It was always one that was filled with either eviction threats or threats of movement or something like that. But now the conversation is changing through approaches that use evidence, that use data, that use information to be able to organize communities and this way claim and advocate for certain interventions at the county and national level. The next slide, please. So moving further and understanding this no organized claim framework is that we have also been able to have the organized women groups. One of these groups is the Women Land Rights Movement, which is a national-wide movement of local women. This is an active space of engagement, active space of participation, active space of influence, and one that really tries to reach as many women so as to really create that movement that gives the voice of the local woman. So it has been particularly been organized so that it directs attention to gender issues and how they manifest at the community level. So through the movement, there are different activities that take place. There are cooperative, primary housing cooperative movements within the bigger movement. There are women who engage in urban agriculture. There are those that who engage in waste management and recycling. So it's a movement that has really positioned participation of women. And this participation is really to look at how can they influence through information sharing and through a presentation of certain models that work in their best interest. The next slide also looks at further how we have been able to really engage the local level action and link it to the national level. And this is the local strategic planning. I've just highlighted some of the key values and principles within this strategic planning framework. We have adaptiveness, and really adaptiveness in terms of what are the innovations that are happening within the local level, and how can these innovations be integrated into planning solutions. We're looking at resilience, we're looking at gender responsiveness, community-led initiatives, flexibility, participation, and within these processes, because it then follows a three-phase framework, we have women participation ensured at the inception up to conclusion, and of course, even through monitoring of the projects. The next slide also really tries to explain how these local strategic processes integrate within the county level processes. So because the local planning processes highlight community felt needs, and they propose community-driven adaptation measures as solutions to these needs. Some of the biggest challenges that affect local communities are these effects of climate change. And communities themselves have their own developed solutions to understanding and to responding to these climate change challenges. So then this strategic document really puts together the challenges, the solutions, and presents a document for conversation and negotiation between communities and the governments. Next slide. So even as we appreciate community or strategic adaptive planning, this is just a short illustration of what we mean, where we begin from recognition of women's needs as part of the community challenges, which initiate or trigger planning. And this is climate responsive planning, which is then facilitated or supported by gender responsive budgeting. So the climate responsiveness planning is very keen to integrate gender responsive budgeting as a way of ensuring that the plans themselves are very gender responsive. So then the gender responsive budgeting then leads to social and physical infrastructure, which then ensures dignity and inclusivity for all. So just a short framework of our understanding of how this strategic climate strategic adaptive planning approaches go on. And also to mention that these processes then connect to the county-wide processes such as the County Integrated Development Plan, where through our advocacy measures, we ensure that the County Integrated Development Plan feeds off the local strategic plans that are community driven. I think as I conclude, the next slide, we'll also look at particularly one of the other approaches that we use. And these are innovative approaches of community ownership of land, or innovative approaches of understanding and appreciating social spatial relationships, and how this illustrates the adaptation at the household level. So this process has been using particularly the social tenure domain model, which is a model that was developed by the Global Land Tool Network as a proper gender responsive land information system. So what this system does is that it tells us what is happening at the community level, what is happening at the household scale, how are people relating to the spaces that they inhabit, what are these kinds of processes and relationships, and how can this be integrated into planning and also appreciating the adaptation measures and how people experience these challenges differently. So these are just some of the local initiatives that we use or that we employ as Pamoja Trust, but having the heart of it is really having community organizing and using these urban innovations that exist to amplify and to connect to county level interventions. I think as I conclude, just last remarks, as some from the experiences that we've had, I think women should be part of climate change responses. And as we talk about participation, we're talking about partnerships, we're talking about delegation, we're talking about democratic control, and not the tokenism in terms of participation. We're looking at climate change responsive measures being about women and about people, investment in gender, as part of the solution, because then they experience these problems directly. We're also thinking about sustainable livelihoods. We have constantly shifting urban ecosystems. What can we do in terms of engaging communities on sustainable livelihoods? We're looking at mainstreaming of gender into climate financing, climate mitigation, and climate adaptation, and having gender mainstreaming frameworks that guide project developments, that guide interventions all the way from inception to conclusion. And finally, local and county level planning processes that appreciate the different violations and discriminations that women experience at the informal settlement level, and being adaptive to how they exist within these spaces. So I think with that, I can conclude my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diana, for sharing with us your experiences and really remarkable initiatives. Very nice. Now so the topic of the UTC is from Brussels to the world, and now we are going the other direction, from the world to Brussels, right? So starting from Colombia, going to Nepal, Kenya, and now we would like to listen to Brussels. So I would like to invite Chloe to come here And maybe you can also share with us your experience and your initiatives. Thank you.
Hello?
Activate.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I will try to be really short and to respect the time of this presentation to leave some time for the question. So my name is Chloé Salambier and I'm representing today the association Angela Day. It's a really young organization. Angela Day was born in 2018. And as you can see on the first slide, we chose to name our association after the African American activist Angela Davis. But Angela Day is also an acronym. In French, Association novatrice pour gérer ensemble le logement et agir durablement, which means innovative association for governing housing together and acting sustainably. Usually, when we think about gender and the city and climate change, we think about public spaces, infrastructure, and territories. The issue are mainly treated in research and taken charge by the public policy, are linked to mobility, safety, care work, etc. When we think about city and gender, most of the time, we don't take into account the domestic scale. We consider this scale as a private issue. This lack of interest for the domestic scale is related to norms inherited from the patriarchal organization of the city. Indeed, our cities are binary organized between public and private space due to the capitalist economy. The gender division of labor has seen women to reproductive work and men to productive work. The domestic and productive spheres are specialized in their function and spatially segregate. Yet the domestic scale is eminently relevant to question to a gender and political perspective for different reasons. First, the issues of access. Today in Brussels, the majority of people experiencing poor housing are single household, elderly, and single parents family. And among these categories, women are in the majority. Access to housing is prioritized according to gender. Second, the issue of housing condition. We don't have many data to consider housing condition in Brussels, but we know that for decades, dwellings have been conceived by and for men needs to rest and enjoy. However, for the woman, it is a workplace. In Europe, the average number of hours spent on unpaid domestic and care work is about 4 hours a day for women. And also domestic spaces are the most dangerous place for women because of domestic violence. The association on Angela Day was born from this observation. Different feminist personality, researcher, activists, social workers from different fields, architecture, urbanism, anthropology, long learning, education, gather around these observations and ask those questions. How to live as a feminist? What will be the ideal of a housing project designed by and for women? We work on the definition. We work on the definition of feminist housing, and it appeared to us that co-housing and collaborative housing correspond most to the feminist and intersectional values that we carry within the association. In this context, we developed the feminist and intersectional housing checklist. I won't detail it today, but I would like to get your attention that this checklist is divided in two major issues. First one, the design of spaces, and second one, the issue of governance and guidance of inhabitants in housing projects. Within the association, we work around three main axes. The first axis, we name it l'atelier, the workshop, aim to create affordable and quality feminist housing. Within this axis, we have developed with a partner the Calico project. Calico is care and living in community in Forêt. The Calico project is 24 dwellings. 10 dwellings are for Angela Day inhabitants. There are also many common spaces in Calico, and the issue of care is at the heart of the project's governance. The 10 dwellings of Angela Day are owned by the Fairground Cooperative. Our contribution in Calico was to develop a specific gender approach to governance within the Angela Day cluster. Also to develop a cross-cutting gender approach with guidelines at all phases of the project and for all our partners, we were 10. And also to train partners on gender issues. Next one. The second axis of Angela Day is the street, la rue. This axis aims to change the mentality and practices of the Brussels housing stakeholders to make the housing design practices evolve. And the third axis is the café. It aims to take care of Angela Day volunteers because we work with about 50 members who may or not may be waiting for housing. And the objective is to create communities of feminist women around the issue of housing in the Brussels region. I have to say that among our members, many women are undocumented, and we have not yet found solutions for this population in Brussels. In brief, what we stand for is the right to the city through feminist housing projects, and to consider that the cities is not only public spaces, but also an accumulation of domestic spaces that need to be governed with a feminist perspective in order to produce a more resilient and inclusive city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe, for this. No, stay with us, yes. Because now we have some minutes for questions from the audience, from the online. Maybe from the people online, they may have some questions. So we have time for questions, remarks, enthusiastic remarks. You say, this is great. There is one comment from the chat, but I cannot see here. Okay. No other questions. Maybe we have some 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Maybe Chloe,
I had a question.
You have a question, but it's
for the Nepalese organ.
Very good, please.
I was wondering because it's also a system of cooperative for the housing, and I was wondering if they were also training women to build herself their own house.
Yes. Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Diana.
Thank you. Yes, we are helping the poor women in the low-income communities, in the slum communities, to get organized through saving schemes, right? And we are helping to get registered cooperatives. So that means we are training them. We do provide them how the cooperative can be registered, what are the required process, or even after the registration of the saving and credit cooperative, how they should be functioning. So in the initial stage, it's a lot of work, helping them, training them, to learn all the processes. But later on, they get trained, and they will be able to function themselves independently. So because they get registered, they are an independent organization, they are an independent entity, right? They have a right, they work as a mini bank in their own community, in the area agreed by the this in the area. They can actually function as a bank, as a cooperative in the area designated for them, where they can actually have expand the members and build their own network, right? So they have the geographical boundary for them to operate. Yes, and then they can get they can get easy access to credit for any purpose, because they are the ones who actually work on the rules and regulations of the cooperatives. They can decide the interest rate, that they can decide their own interest rate for the savings, and also for the loans, for housing, for health, for employment. So that means they can get access to credit also for housing purpose. We also work with the cooperatives to promote the housing schemes as well. So we are also working with some cooperatives and helping them to work on the housing schemes. We worked with one cooperative to buy the land, and also to plan to design the settlement, right? So we have actually worked with the cooperatives to help them to access the financial resources to improve their own housing, or even for reconstruction as well after the earthquake. So we mobilized the cooperatives, mobilized the women to do the reconstructions. So they are doing the reconstructions, and they are accessing the credit facilities for the housing purpose as well. Thank you,
Lanaka. Thank you so much. I think there was a question over there. Wait a moment, because we need the mic if for
Thank you. I guess my question is for you, and I come from a public health background, and I was wondering, since climate change and epidemics are related, my question would be: have we seen a rise in demand for this collaborative shared housing from women after COVID, seeing a rise in gender-based violence? And the need to spend more time at home indoors, and how do we see that in Brussels, for example? Thank you.
Can you? Yeah. No, because the people are online also, so they want to listen to your question. It's about the shared space, huh?
Yeah, it's about this shared space, sort of like a safe space for women. I think that's what you're creating. And I think this is perhaps needed more now than ever after COVID, because of both the need to spend more time at home for women, and because of this, women who are already in vulnerable situations have been vulnerabilized even more. And I'm wondering how both climate change and epidemics as COVID will fuel a demand for more of these safe spaces for women.
So what we think is that to have a common space is really an empowerment for a woman, especially for a woman with vulnerability. And we think especially to one single family household. And what we have observed is that during the epidemic, they were really vulnerable because they had to work and to take care of their child on their own. And what we observed is that if they are living in a co-living, they can have the support of other inhabitants and to organize together to take care of the child and or to share all the domestic work among the community. But in Brussels today, there are quite many breaks to this kind of initiative. On the juridic level first, because if the woman decide, for example, to live together in a normal house of Brussels, they will have less family allocation. It will be low than if they are considered as isolated. It is one limit of the context of Brussels. And also what we observe for co-living project is a problem with urbanistic. They have difficulties to get the urban planning authorization in Brussels. So they are still a medic break, even if we see that the co-living is a way to support the housing crisis for some household in Brussels, but there are still some problem to address this issue.
That's the context in Brussels. I think it's clear, right? Do we have another question from the audience? Sophie? But I have a question, sorry, I have a question also for Margot, because I just heard that she's available only 5 minutes now, I think. And this question is, yes, it's related to your presentation just before. Margot, are you there? Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
I hope. So you were mentioning a lot of programs and funding programs, right? Where you are able to finance and co-finance several initiatives. You saw the programs in Nepal and also in Kenya. Is it possible for you to support this kind of initiatives of community initiative? Is it within these funding programs or not? Do you support also other kind of initiatives?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. Actually, my presentation was very on a large scale and multilateral level. So indeed, I spoke about several initiatives we are financing, but this is very, international and multilateral scale. For a local project like this, it's more related to our ODA, and we have several programs, and my colleague from Agence Française de Développement, Mar, told a bit about. We have specific financing for and funding for local association, CSO, and initiatives. So, for example, I spoke about this support fund for feminist organization. This is typically this kind of project we are able to finance because we want to help improving, operating costs, building capacities and activities on the ground. And so last year we had a specific call for project of 5 million euros to finance this kind of initiatives. And we are working on the next year and how we will be able to continue this fund, which is very important for us. And for sure, gender and climate change will be one of the next topic that we will be able to tackle. And this specific focus on also urban planification, cities, and local initiatives is quite new for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but we are very interested in it, and we understood very well how important it is for gender issues. So this support fund will hopefully continue in the next years, and we will be able to finance this kind of project.
Excellent. So this is exactly where we can also connect and bring also these experiences together.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. So I saw one question here from the floor. Sophie, maybe you can.
Yes, I was wondering if in your 4 countries and 4 organizations, do you at one point include men's, or which is, I mean, where are men in your organization, or if you want to include them in the future, or if you target them in your communication, like a large question about this gender segregations.
Yes, very good. So who would like to take the floor? And so from Kenya, maybe Diana?
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I was having a bit of internet connectivity issues. May I get the question again?
It's about the role of men, and especially men are also included in your initiatives, because you were mentioning only women.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I actually highlighted that within the women land rights movement, that we have both male and female champions. Our strategy is not only limited to women participation, but men as well, because it's also about changing perceptions and changing culture and changing just ideas about traditional roles. So yes, our focus is also including the men. And particularly even in advocacy, key advocacy moments, we have the men or the male champions also participating very actively within these processes. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic, very nice. Do we have more questions from the floor? If not, thank you. Stay with us, please. We are going to have a nice discussion now between 2 persons. I would like to invite Léon Drapeau from this Brussels region, and Angèle Curie and Sophie also, and have a nice dialogue here on the stage. It's okay? Yes, fantastic. Yeah, thank you. No, I think that you have, but later on we are going to have the discussion where you can join us again.
Is this really a discussion?
No, this is up to you. This is a presentation of your activities, and then also the dialogue on gender mainstreaming.
Yes, sir.
Very good. The floor is yours. It's up to you now. And you will get also a mic, which is good, and then you can share this. Yes, should be okay.
Is it working? Oh, sorry, I didn't. Hi, everyone. My name is Léon Drapeau. I am working in the strategic department of Perspective Brussels, which is the Brussels region organ in charge of territorial planning and strategies. I feel like my intervention at the very end of all of these very concrete and very down-to-earth project is a bit maybe distant, because what I'll be sharing with you today is actually my questions and my doubts and my maybe ideas, hopefully, in the project which I am currently working on, which is the creation of a gender mainstreaming plan for Perspective Brussels. And I'll maybe get into more detail, but first I would like to open maybe this presentation or talk with with my doubts, basically, because I was very, very happy to hear when Chloe mentioned that usually when we talk about gender mainstreaming and gender or feminism and space, we usually think about public space. I completely agree, but the scale of the territory for me is so much more distant, so much more difficult to grasp. The time span is so long that I find it personally difficult to project really the actions which can be led and which can have an effect on gender equality. I had written down lots of terrifying statistics about women in Belgium, women in Brussels, but they are also very anecdotal and they are not reflective of the entire scope of inequalities which exist. And so I don't want to really list them after all, but what I do want to say perhaps is that the question which is on my mind all the time is, what is the role that the city plays in maintaining these many inequalities which we know exist? And I'm sure I don't need to convince you, although some people do need convincing, so this will need to be done at some point in my professional scope. And more importantly, what role can the city play in alleviating some of these inequalities? And in my sort of thought process on going through all of these, this potential checklist of projects, of ideas, of scopes of intervention that perhaps we could work on. First of all, what is the role of public spaces you were mentioning? Are they secure enough? Are they adapted enough to women's uses? We know that the feeling of insecurity lowers the use of public spaces for women, and that therefore women are less represented in public space, less visible in public space. We also know that public space does not necessarily respond to the needs of women to feel legitimate and comfortable enough using the space. And this begins very early. It begins with girls from 10 to 12 years old. At that point in their life, don't find the necessary or adapted sports or leisure equipment in parks, for instance. And this creates perhaps a bit of a rift between expectations of what women should be able to do and what they actually do in public spaces. Could it also be the way that functions are spread out through the city, the way that the city is composed, where we find different kinds of functions? Could it be that they are made in this way less attractive or less accessible to women in particular? I'm thinking about zoning. This has been studied also very much, the fact that when housing is separated from all other functions, and women find themselves confined to these housing areas and unable to leave them, does this play a role in restricting their use of public amenities? Another aspect perhaps could be looking at the transport network. Is it secure enough? Does it function in a way that women can use it conveniently? For example, we know that women's trajectories in the cities are longer than those of men. They're also more fragmented. They have more stops along the way, and they have more roles to accomplish along their daily transport. They also tend to be accompanied more, for instance, with children. And does, for example, the paying system to access public transport, is it adapted to carrying around children, for instance? There's the notion of peak time and off-peak time as well. Do they fit with the needs of women? We all know that this does not concern only women, of course, but for people who work very early or very late hours, sometimes don't find the necessary transport infrastructure to make them feel safe enough to use. Is there, or could there be, a deficit in childcare facilities, meaning are they well located, are they accessible, but also are they accessible in terms of price range and in terms of hours, for instance. We could also investigate the housing systems. Are they adapted to the evolving needs of women? Could possibly, and this is a question I would love to answer, could a different housing planning allow a better sharing of tasks within households, for instance? There's also the question of ownership models. We know that women are more subject to precarity. So if there's some major life event like losing a job or a divorce, women tend to be in worse economic conditions afterwards and with less access to housing. There's also, and this is an observation, a deficit of political representation, and this is on all scales of political representation, all the way down to public participation in various kinds of projects. And this is something that we're working on. And perhaps a last point that I am putting forward is that there is, and my presentation today shows this, there's a lack of knowledge as to the role that we can play to improve the city and improve the city's role in fighting for gender equality. And there's also a lack of data that we can exploit and use to finally understand what can be done. So well, as a conclusion, that's what I'm trying to investigate right now, trying to construct the strategy, which will allow the teams at perspective, so from data collection to analysis of urban conditions on whatever scale, whatever they may be, all the way to drawing up strategic plans on different levels, different scales, and different scales in time. Hopefully this, hopefully some answers can be found as to how into projects we can now begin transforming this consideration into action.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Leon. You maybe, Sophie and Angèle, I have my mic, that's good. Maybe you can share also your ideas and your, I mean, what you learned also last time, because we had an action day some weeks before with the kind of reflections on this topic. So maybe Sophie or Angèle, who would like to start?
It's working. Okay, so I'm Angèle. I'm a student at the Masters of Urbanism Transition Urbanism at ULB. So I have a question for Leon. It's not like a question, but maybe how do you think like you can influence all the departments at perspective to start taking into consideration the gender balance issue? Mm-hmm. And are you ambitious enough, for example, to achieve like an improvement from the government? Like we always receive that for the green spaces, biodiversity, etc. So they can like force people to start implementing the gender balance?
Both are a yes, of course. To your first question, one of the things, for instance, that we're working on and which concerns all different departments at perspective is that we're trying to set up, I really have bad vocabulary in English on this subject, but we're trying to set up the legal framework in order to encourage the teams of experts that we work with who apply to our calls and respond to our markets, for them to pay more attention to having more diverse teams. We work with architects, we work with urban planners a lot. They are one of our main like types of experts that we call for. And we know that in this area, women are underrepresented on the professional level. So one thing that we're trying to do is to have more diverse or better representation of women in the people that we work with, basically. So this is not a guarantee that we will have a better output in terms of gender equality, but we're building towards that direction. So that's one action that is already being worked on and that impacts every department. And as for political validation, Thankfully, there are a lot of public initiatives right now led by the Brussels region, where there are lots of different plans that have been set up. And this gender diversity initiative that I am currently working on is part of a government initiative. So it already has the political backing, and I'm hoping that it will get more as it moves on.
Okay, so I have another, like, not also a question, but like we can see that urban planning or urbanism, they have the responsibility to like take the gender balance into account. And so in our curriculum, for example, we always collaborate with Perspective, La Chère Perspective. Each year we work with the department with the Perspective on our workshops and stuff like that. I don't know if you can influence also, for example, the department is working with us to like put the gender balance into like in relevance. So this year they will be working on the conversion of the offices, and for so.
Indeed, I think it's a good idea to. What I have observed from working with my colleagues, with different people in the institution, is that even if there's a global intention, which is positive to have better gender equality, actually no one knows how to do it. And that makes it difficult when we're accompanying projects, because we can only say so much, and then we can't really give the expertise. And that means that the expertise needs to come from somewhere, and it can come on a professional level from this initiative that I'm working on, but ideally it should be more widespread, and it should exist already before in education.
So there's
yes. I just wanted to say that, like, thanks to ULB and the faculty, we had the chance to have this workshop and the action day where we learned a lot. And yeah, maybe it could be more integrated in our curriculum. I study personally architecture before, like 5 years, and we did not have any mandatory lecture about gender challenges. And now we are both students in the specific master about urbanism and transition. And we also did not have one lecture about it. And maybe it could be good to gather all this knowledge for our future generation and maybe to integrate them not through another topic, not through climate or through economy, but really directly about gender. And like here in architecture, it's also the occasion to practice about this topic. In every year you have 2 studio, I guess, so you could also experiment about architecture and urbanism with this challenge.
Excellent remark, Sophie. I mean, I can also relay this key message also to the authorities of ULB. I can transfer this, but I can also thank Cities Alliance to bring this topic also to the ULB, because as a professor teaching urban planning, this issue was never mentioned in the curriculum of master planning, etc. So what you mentioned before, sharing the knowledge, sharing the data, etc., it's also a problem of education, simply. And what we learned from Nepal and Kenya and the others, there is a key problem of education, I mean, from the ground, simply, where the people have to be educated also in the administrations, the decision-making process, etc. So, I mean, what we can do is simply open the debate, right? To everyone, and I hope that there are people still online and they can also contribute to the discussion. I would say, Chloe, maybe you can also come to the stage and no? No, okay. Mike is here.
I want to answer to the proposition to have a gender issue in the School of Architecture. I'm also a professor in the School of Architecture. So I know that this topic is not really known by the students. They don't know to deal with this issue. They have many issues to deal with climate change. And it seems to be another limit and difficulty in the project. They have so many things to take into account. But what I try to explain to them, it's gender can also be seen as a lever, as an opportunity to change the way we are developing the city with a completely different paradigm, and those vision, feminist vision, is also good for everyone, because if we are taking as a point all the issues of reproductive work, is good for men, for women, for everyone. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. And I want to say that the second axis of Angela Day is to change the mentality, to train the stakeholders in Brussels about these issues of gender. And one of the topics of this second axis is to have a gender course in the program of every School of Architecture, not in Belgium, but to start is in Communauté Française. So it is one of the points we try to deal with.
Excellent, very good. Would you would like to react on that? Maybe you would like to say yes. You say yes for Greg.
Okay, thanks. So in Cities Alliance, we have a phrase we use often, and that is that, and it's based on the issue that most of our cities in the world are designed by men, and therefore they don't always work for women. And our saying in Cities Alliance that cities that work for women work for everyone, but not the other way around. It's the same with our buildings, and it's marvelous to see people and a whole generation of architects that are women coming through, because many of our buildings are designed by men as well. And a woman in local government was saying to me that, so often outside of the council chamber, the unofficial face-to-face in the corridor stuff happens during breaks. Just find out how long men take in the toilet and how long women take in the toilet. And you find that all that informal work that happens in between the formal work happens between men. I mean, I don't know, I've got a public health background as well, and I think it's quite simple. Build more toilets. It's not hard. And this is an issue that's not just in the global south. So we hosted by the UN. The UN General Assembly happens in that big building in New York, and it took Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, to arrive with her child for the UN to realize they had no lactation rooms. That even in the UN, where the UN General Assembly is held, that building has no lactation rooms. So good on Jacinda Ardern. So on the whole issue of architecture and the design of buildings, the design of cities, it will change. And as more and more women come through, and unfortunately, most women are also taught by men. So it's going to take another generation to change it, or we put a lot of effort into to change it now. And then, sorry, just the people online, it's wonderful to hear these examples of gender and climate and what's happening, because make no mistake, the climate crisis, the burden of the climate crisis is overwhelmingly borne by the poor. Like everything else in the world, the poor bear the biggest burden. They live on unsafe land, there's no services, there's rivers that get flooded. So when we look at the floods that happened in Germany and Belgium last year, and if Germany and Belgium is that vulnerable, what about the people living in informal settlements? And the face of poverty is woman. So the work that Diane and our colleague from Nepal is doing, good on you, because we need this and we need it globally. Thanks.
We need it globally and we don't have so much time left. You want to say something? Maybe somebody from online attendees, they would like to say something. Yes, Abbas, Abdullah, encouragement and quota system should be given to women to address gender-based balance in terms of political participation, access to land, education, urban planning, climate change, conflict, dispute resolution, etc. Would you like to react on that? Yes, no? No, I had a question and it was related to, I think, Diana, about your initiative on community ownership land. Diana, are you still there? Yes. So it was very interesting to learn how you are organizing yourself, but also the question would be, do you have in that sense the support of the region and do you have the support of the municipality? And how is the dialogue there? Because it's always related to decision making and who is taking the decision, especially related to these community rules. Are you still there? Diana is maybe not anymore online. I think most of the Veronica Cheptum, you would like to say something? You're welcome. Yes, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I'll be responding on behalf of Diana, my colleagues in Turkana. She might be having issues with the connectivity. So the question whether we are working with the municipalities or even the county or even national government, yes, we are. And in Diana's presentation, she talked of organizing communities to respond to particular issues in the informal settlement. And particularly if you are responding to the security of tenure issue, that any challenge or even any issue touching issues of land, for you to realize or even to support this community to realize their objective, it's important that you are, yes, we are working with them. So we are working with all levels of government. We are working with the national county government, the national government, and now what we've done is that we are able to bring all stakeholders on board. And as Diana was presenting about a framework of stakeholder engagement, yes, they play a very key role. So for instance, even in demonstrating or even piloting the models at work, in terms of even responding to the security of tenure, we are working with the county government through the Nairobi City County, for instance, if it's Nairobi, because they are the owners of land. And in the process of STDM, they are brought on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. Do we have more questions or topics we would like to discuss? So, yes or no? I think then it's time to conclude, and then after that we can have a coffee or whatever. So what the topic of our Urban Thinker Campus, from Brussels to the world, or from the world to Brussels, I think that it was very, very interesting learning and having sharing all these experiences with the different continents. So we were covering today 5 continents. Can you imagine? So it was very broad discussion from Colombia, Nepal, Africa, Brussels, and more countries here around. And so what we can say in a nutshell, right? So we were talking about social injustice. We were talking about the lack of access to resources like water. That was mentioned several times in Colombia, in Cochabamba, where the water issues were very key, right? And 50% of access to water system is simply not existing, which is really a question of infrastructure. We were talking in Nepal about women's role, but also related to the lack of economic empowerment, no power decision making, and also the lack of access to facilities. We learned about the network of cooperation and the community women forum, so the different cooperatives we could see related and connected to this women forum. In Kenya, we learned about also the power or the action of on land, the problem of insecurity, the problem of lack of land ownership, the problem of social security, and that simply local women can raise their voice. So that was very interesting to learn about, to know, to organize, and to claim the three main aspects of their experiences. But also we learned about Brussels. We learned about Angel is working, right? And how the Brussels region is really well working on transforming these the different policies, and of course from the interventions before about starting from Anne Jansen about the climate resilience and also the key, because climate resilience is really strongly related to this inequality. But also we learned from the French ministry how they are organizing and funding also these different initiatives, and how the AFD, the Agence Française de Développement, is also supporting and developing these actions. So we learned that in general, this topic is key, but it is also a young topic. We learned that it's not included in the different curricula of the university. So there is a really need to start this education process, starting from the beginning, in fact, yeah. The students get aware about this and include in the architecture and the urban planning knowledge, in fact. So I hope we have enough for today in terms of knowledge and knowledge sharing. Please spread the word and talk about everybody, and mention that this is really a key aspect of for future cities and how we are going to manage and achieve the SDGs before 2030. I think at the end, this is the target we have. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you for all the people online, and see you next time. I hope that you are going to be all in Katowice at the World Urban Forum, and online or on-site, and we will discuss also these topics in several sessions, by the way. Thank you.